What's up, guys? So I have some other thoughts for you this morning. In Mark chapter 9, there's this story that's got a couple pretty cool things that kind of challenge my faith and give us some hope, I think. 14, it says, when they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them, and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. What are you arguing with them about? He said. A man in the crowd answered, Teacher, I brought my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not. Then Jesus says, O unbelieving generation, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? And then he says, bring the boy to me. So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into convulsions. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, how long has he been like this? From childhood, he answered. It has often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on him and help us. If you can, said Jesus, everything is possible for him who believes. Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. When Jesus saw that the crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the evil spirit. You deaf and mute spirit, he said, I command you to come out of him and never enter him again. The spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said he's dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. After Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, why couldn't we drive it out? And he replied, this kind can only come out through prayer and fasting. So many things, different moments in my life I can remember of dealing with a certain situation or an issue for so long that eventually I stopped praying. I stopped believing that God was going to do anything. I stopped expecting God to be God. Because that's essentially what we do when we lack faith, is we don't expect God to be God. Because God being God means healing comes. When God is God, that means he fixes the situation. He helps the situation. He comes in and he makes it right. He rectifies it. He takes what is wrong and puts it in its rightful place. So what happened here is this father had, from childhood, it said that the boy had this demon since he was young. So what happened? The father began to lose faith. He had done everything he had done. He'd prayed all the prayers he could pray. He'd been to all the places, but it wasn't the right time yet. And so nothing had changed. And so because it wasn't the right time for God to move, he thought that God wasn't going to move. He lost his faith. Too many times with family, that's an easy thing to do. And when our family doesn't change the way that we want it to, when our parents stay the same, our siblings stay the same, our kids stay the same, whatever the situation may be for you, if it's that way long enough, Satan's going to rob us of our faith. It's exactly what happened here. Because it stayed that way long enough, Satan robbed this family and this father of his belief that God could and would move. I love what it says down here too. And the disciples asked, why couldn't we drive him out? And he replied, this kind can only come out through prayer and fasting. So I think a lot of times we want the vending machine Jesus. We want to put the 50 cents in, push the button, and have it all come out for us. But the reality is there's things that God wants to know that we're going to be faithful enough to seek him. There's things that he wants to know that we're going to be disciplined enough to say no. Too often we want it to come easy. We want it to come like salvation. Salvation was free. And that's an amazing gift that we have. But living for God will not be. Living for God will not be free. It'll cost us everything. And then when there's certain things in our life that are only going to break and only going to change when we seek God, when we're consistent in prayer, when we're asking him to move on a daily basis, and maybe for years before we see a breakthrough. I believe it's right and it's godly. I believe that it's because God wants to see our diligence. God will bless your diligence. He'll bless your faithfulness. He'll bless mine. He'll bless us when we consistently seek him for our own personal life spiritually, and also for the things that we need Him to do in our lives, in our families. So in context is oxygen, as we've been struggling through and fighting through and talking about the concepts of sex and dating and all of those things and being pure until marriage and the big M and all of that kind of stuff, I encourage you to seek God. Don't lose faith. Don't lose hope. Pray daily about the things that you want to see God do. And then when you lack faith, pray the prayer this guy prayed. I do believe. Help me overcome my belief. As he asks God to come and help him and to come in and do what he needs him to do it. I love that because he's not just asking God to do it, but he's saying, God, help me in my weakness. Help me where I'm not strong enough. Help me in the area that I have that's preventing this from happening. Because if you don't, I don't have the ability to do what's needed. So, we love you guys, and I just encourage you today, have faith. Believe for the things that you haven't seen yet. And just be consistent in prayer as you're figuring out what battles you to conquer and how to conquer them. Step 1, consistently seek God about those struggles.